welcome to our webcast on finding the right business partners for success. I'm your host, Devon Gillard, CMO from F12.net. Well, this is a great topic to dig into today. Business partnerships, I think we all know anecdotally and from our own experience, the right partner can make a huge difference in the success of your business or organization, as the case may be, and the wrong partner can distract, derail things, cause unnecessary, it can sometimes be terminal for an organization. So it's a really important topic. To help us explore it, I've got two guests that I'm really excited to introduce. First of all, I'll introduce, I think, to the first time ever for our webcast, Ethan Wolfe. Ethan, welcome.
Thanks,
I'm
Devon.
going to do my best to set you up, but you can fill in any of the blanks that I might get wrong. So Ethan, I understand, like my wife, you're a graduate of Queen's University. And after that, you got your MBA from the Rotman School of Business. You work with Clairvest as a VP right now, which is a Canadian private equity firm, sit on the board of a few companies. And the reason I know you is for the last few years, you've been on the board of directors of F12.net. Have I got all of that right?
That's all correct. I'm happy to be making my silver screen debut here on the F12 webcast.
and we're very happy to have you. So obviously, and we'll get into this later on, but in your role, finding and nurturing the right partners is pretty much what you do. So that's why we wanted to get Ethan on this discussion and get his perspective. And of course, I'm very happy to welcome back our CEO of F12.net, Alex Webb, back to the webcast. Alex, I'm going to give a little bit of a 10-second bio of you. You founded F12, I think, about 27 years ago in your basement and grew it up. And right from the beginning, we'll get into this, you've had partners along. You've invited employee partners. You've had outside investors. You've had equity partners. And so partnership and finding the right business partners and sometimes exiting the wrong ones has been a long part of your story. Fair to say all of that?
Yeah, I think you got it pretty much right there from a timeline and all that. And I'm certainly happy to have Ethan here as well, and to talk about this great topic. So thanks for having me.
Excellent, and a shout out to this topic came up because it was a frequent question we get asked. Folks have, clients, customers, vendor partners, they've noticed that F12 success has involved partnership. It's never been a one-man show of Alex. And we'll get into the history there. And they just wanted us to explore a little bit about how it's worked, what we've learned, and what recommendations and lessons we may have that they can take. So that's why we're having this discussion. And I wanted to start off with exploring what it means to be the importance that each of you two gentlemen have found in your professional careers from finding the right business partner and what that might mean, the correct business partner. So, Alex, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to phrase it this way. What does the term good business partner mean to you?
Thanks, Devon. Yeah, partnerships are something I think about a lot. As you've already indicated, it's been a big part of our DNA as an organization on how we developed. And but first thing, I just want to make sure I really frame up for the audience is that partnerships can be equity partners, they can be investors, they can be employee owners, they can be clients, they can be vendors, people that you sort of engage with. But the reality of a good partnership is they really help you fill the gaps in your organization. They help you with the new capabilities that you want to advance to. They can help you with growth capital. But when I sort of look at the heart of what it is, as far as what that good partner would feel like, and it's somebody to help you achieve those business goals, somebody that aligns with where you want to take the organization, and ultimately, I guess, in the end of the day, for mutual benefit. So I think when those things come together holistically, you have a good partnership.
That's very succinctly put. And without allowing you at this time to go into the full history of F12, how important has having and finding and nurturing the right partners been to the success of the organization?
Well, partnering has been in our DNA really since the beginning, and how important it is. I mean, it would be really difficult for me to measure, I think. But I would likely have to say, without partnerships, I think we would have probably failed, or at minimum been much smaller of an organization than we are today. So I think partnerships are the reason we've accomplished what we've accomplished. So.
And when we talk about small, just for everybody's context, it started out with Alex in his basement and a bunch of computer boxes in the 90s. So, it could have not expanded beyond that without help from others. We'll get into that. Ethan, I don't want to leave you out of the conversation there. I'm going to put the same question to you. How would you, and by extension, the Clairvest group, define a good business partner that you're looking to engage with?
Much of what Alex said rings true. We're looking for high integrity people and organizations that have alignment of interests with ourselves and with each other, the leadership team within the organization, and a culture of winning, striving to be better every day, continue to improve performance, and not accept the status quo.
Nicely put as well. And I think this is an obvious answer in your case, but I'll ask it anyway. How important is it to the success of Clairvest to find and nurture the right business partnerships?
It's, along with selecting the right industry, it's the, 1-2 punch. The Clairvest approach is, for those who aren't familiar with it, a domain-focused approach. We choose industries that we have a belief in for the long-term success, like IT services in the case of F12. And then from there, it's about choosing the right partner, a team that we think we can be aligned with and will win alongside.
Perfect. Okay. That whole section may have been unnecessary, but if anybody wasn't convinced partnerships were important, hopefully we've established that fact. So let's get into the meat of the conversation now. Alex, I'd love to hear some experiences, examples from you about your journey. Like get into the meat of it, of what partnerships have meant for you as you've grown from, as I mentioned, the one-man show entrepreneur up to where we are today.
Yeah, sure. And sort of back to this topic of the different types of partners, from my seat, partnerships were day one, even in that basement. Back then it was equity partners, or should I say maybe more sweat equity partners. And in the incubation phase of the business, which I think most organizations are about 5, we took 10. We were slow learners. But what resembled more of sort of a frat house, 100-hour work weeks, crap pay, or maybe even at some points no pay. The partners that we attracted at the time were sort of more excited around what it was that we were accomplishing as a business, the technology. It was only about those things. And the evolution of the business, and then it was a client that became an investor partner, right? One of our top clients that was with us, and they sold their business. And because they sold their business, we were losing our best client, but we ended up getting one of our best investors of all time from go 20 years ago. His name's Wayne.
Actually, Alex, I've heard you tell the story before, but I think it's worth it for the audience for you to explain how that went down.
Sure. They were in the automotive business, so they weren't even in the tech sector. And we did their IT, and we took care of the organization, all the back office. They were about 13 locations. And at that point, we really just had a dream of becoming bigger. Like, we knew we could do more. We were good at what we did. We had a lot of heart, but we didn't have the business experience. And so what I saw immediately in Wayne was this tremendous business experience, multi-location, multi-provincial, and he had also something that we really needed at that point in time, was some capital dollars that could help us grow the business. But it wasn't the real reason why we wanted him. We wanted him more for the mentorship, and he's still a partner to this day, 21 or 22 years later. So it's been terrific. The other thing from a partnership that I think that we've done very well is attracting long-term employees in and inviting them in, and where they would take their own dollars and invest in the organization and believe in what we're doing. I think it's a testament to sort of that two-way relationship. And then of course we have our private equity groups. We were first with a group called Roynat, which we got into the investment and we came out of the investment, but that was the very first time we got the board of directors. We got that sort of development of that crystallization of a real business sort of formed. And then I think we were ready for the bigger leagues with a group like Clairvest. And And for us, it was all about selecting that right partner and making sure that those alignments were there, as I talked about earlier. And then the last one so I got one more, that I just want to make sure.
Okay, I was gonna leave it, but if you want to bring it up, go ahead.
No, it's just the vendor partners are also very important to our success. They help us develop and advance that technology that we need to serve our clients. They help us educate our folks and the team members within F12 to create a better version of who we are. So I think that's about it.
Perfect. I'm going to come back to you. There's a thread I want to pull on there, but let's bring Ethan back. Ethan, you've obviously got perspective across a number of businesses and partnerships, and probably see some successes and some that aren't. Describe for us what you've seen. Like, what are your anecdotes of great, successful business partners? What did they look like? What were their attributes?
So I think the attributes, or where partnerships work best with a PE firm, which is, from the seat I'm sitting in, is where there's complementary skills. We bring a certain lens, and we're trusting our partners to bring another lens or a different ability. We're a financing partner and are good at some things and are very bad at others. We're not operators. We don't pretend to be. So when we're looking for an investment partner like F12, we want to partner with someone who is capable at running the business, because we won't, and if we did it, we would probably mess it up. But what we're good at is bringing M&A capabilities, helping with rounding out a leadership team, leaning in on other corporate objectives, and where it works best is where those two things come together, and both sides can pull on each other's strengths, and we're being tapped on the shoulder for the things we're great at, and letting our partners run with the things that they're great at.
I love when you dive into that about having complementary skills and abilities and experience is so critical. It kind of reminds me of a marriage, right? Like, you often are attracted to opposites because they bring different things into the relationship and fill maybe gaps you have. And that a great partnership is where there's some complementary abilities. Yeah.
For sure. And other times I'd say so that's, once the partnership is formed, how to work well together. And then I would also say, why does the partnership form is another, sort of theme. There may be differing objectives among stakeholders that a partner can help fulfill. So one of our recent investments, Acera Insurance, the shareholders of Acera had differing objectives. Either some were retiring, some wanted to reinvest, different time horizons, and there are 350 different shareholders, all with slightly different views of what they want. And without an outside partner, it's hard to satisfy everyone's needs. So a third-party capital partner like Clairvest, or the same could be true for F12 when looking at a tuck-in acquisition. If they're differing shareholder objectives of a potential business partner for an acquisition for F12, sometimes a different firm can fulfill the needs, provide liquidity for retiring shareholders, give partial liquidity for those that are continuing, and allow them to reinvest and continue to grow the business. So there's, why does it work? There's sometimes a catalyst that says, okay, we need a partner to satisfy the objectives that are now misaligned within an organization, but we're not ready to concede to one view. We want to make everybody happy.
It's a really interesting point. Hey, like, there may be this magical partnership that's gone to a point where now, in the fullness of time, there's different objectives, and another partner can help everybody get what they want. And some want to continue, some want out in 5 years, whatever the story may be. Alex, there's a question I want to ask, and that is, and this is something I admire about you, so not to pump your tires, but right from the beginning, you didn't make this the Alex Webb show. Like, you brought in Wayne, as you mentioned. You brought in employees. You did mergers and acquisitions, how I got to join the team. And it wasn't like, thanks for your company, Devon, you and your partner are out. It was like, hey, let's continue. Let's grow this thing together. Why do you invite, and you continue to do that through mergers and acquisitions, it's been over a dozen now. Why do you continue, maybe even why did you decide to invite others on the journey and not just keep it concentrated and centralized?
It's a good question, Devon, and not one that you put in the notes. So thank you. But the reason is there's strength in numbers. This particular industry, the technology IT space, is very complex. There is a ton of knowledge that's needed to drive it, to keep it healthy, and to advance it forward. And it was pretty evident very early on that this wasn't something that could be done alone. Which then I think meant that it was going to have to be, we're going to have to invite other people to the party and create that mutual benefit for success. And I'm happy we did, because I think as a result, we're a much stronger organization, because it isn't just about size, it's about the strength and health and the ability to deliver those IT services like security, data center, that's geo-redundant in 2 provinces, 1,000 miles apart. So we can offer these levels just because of these partnerships and development. So that's the why.
Awesome. All right. Well, it behooves us to explore the negative aspect of business partnerships, because I think, it's not all roses, and sometimes it doesn't work out as well as we might hope. And I think I'm going to assume, Ethan, Clairvest doesn't have 100% batting average on finding everybody, and certainly F12 hasn't always been 100% great in our filtering, and we'll get to that later. So I'd love to hear about, without naming names or shaming anybody, just some examples and learnings from poor relationships or partnerships that ultimately prove to be distracting. Either of you. It's an open question.
Sure, I can jump in. It's sort of the opposite, and it's not always just black and white. It kind of is a scale of gray that slides a little bit. But I would say, whereas a good partnership has great alignment of interests, a partnership that fails has misalignment of interests, and it's not overnight. Sometimes those interests just misalign slowly. One example from Clairvest experience would be, and won't name companies, but a CEO who lived an hour and a half or so away from the corporate head office, and that worked for a short period of time. But over time, it was just more, and this one CEO also had different interests beyond the different business interests beyond just the operation that we were invested in, a smaller business closer to home. And so that competing mind share or usage of this person's time started becoming a larger part of their focus, primarily for convenience. It was an hour and a half to get to work, and this was in their hometown, this other small but growing business. And over time, that became a more important part of that person's life, which is, obviously totally fine. Everyone's entitled to allocate their time how they choose. But obviously, the partnership with Clairvest was in a business that was an hour and a half away from this person's house, and getting less attention over time. So, the end result was, call it a mediocre performance. The business did fine, but it wasn't, a fantastic growth business, because there was just less management attention and, call it, over time misalignment of interests of where the leadership team wanted to spend their time.
At the risk of causing offense or embarrassing myself, it does occur to me this is often what I see when I watch Dragon's Den. They're trying to figure out is how invested is that individual? Are they going to put their focus fully into this enterprise before they put money into it, or is it just a weekend hobby? And I see that hinges on it. So I get that. Same to you, Alex. Lessons, learnings, anecdotes from where things didn't work out as well as they should have, or you hope they would have.
Yeah, though, the one that comes to mind, top of mind, is we acquired a company, and I thought we had alignment, and I have to wholly agree with Ethan, because it's all about alignment of goals and objectives. What do you want to accomplish? Which has to overcome those competing interests. But, ultimately in this case, we thought we had somebody that was invested on where we were going, but the reality is they really just wanted to exit, but they didn't want to say they wanted to exit. They thought they could get more value for their organization by saying, I'm just going to be part of this, and sort of went along the motions. But we quickly saw that in the behaviors after close, And the trauma that it took on the organization was on their people, our people. They were confused. Clients were confused. And this is a number of years ago. And of course, you mend it. But for me, it was a telltale. It's like how to avoid these things. You have to sort of be swift. You have to act quickly and pay, right? You can't have somebody that doesn't want to be there. And that's just the reality. Just like in Ethan's case, I'm sure if that person was forced, it wouldn't work either. So you have to find a different way forward, right?
Which leads me to a question about that, because this is going to happen in the life of partners. Even if there was alignment at the beginning, and maybe there never was, there gets to be a point where things, life experiences change and things come out of alignment. Mm-hmm. What recommendations do you guys have from your experience about how to get out, like divorce, as it were, or separate a partnership in the way that's got the least trauma and the most benefit for all parties? How do you approach it?
There's, I think, two ways to think about that. One is, at the beginning, to use your marriage analogy, you need to sign a prenup. You have terms of the arrangement in your shareholders agreement, and which governs the relationship and how it might end, so that everyone's treated fairly, which I think is important. So if you bring in a private equity partner or a third party investor, there need to be terms of how that investor can exit, and the company might still be able to continue, so that at the point in time in the future, when the time horizons might differ, your private equity partner is treated fairly, you're treated fairly, and you've outlined the terms of the arrangement up front. And often there's that's a big part of the negotiation when you bring in a third party capital provider, to just make sure when the time comes, and up front, the investment might be 6 or 7 years, but you are running a company for the next 60 years, that you can make it work together.
So I suppose when a PE firm comes in, they set those things up because of vast experience. But even if you're just, I don't know, 3 entrepreneurial owners who are getting along right now, it might be the right time to figure out what the rules of disengagement are while you still all like each other and are engaged. Hey, Alex, same thing. What's been your experience about how to separate kindly?
Well, I think the first thing, prevention goes a long ways, so from my seat, it's working really hard to win them over first, and exhausting that. If you can't, then hopefully you can fall back. But there was a time when we didn't have a USA, that didn't exist in the organization. So if it's inevitable, then you just got to deal with it head on. You don't skirt it, is my advice to anybody on this. Would be just face it head on and confront it, and be very transparent, and try to get an outcome that, again, has mutual benefit for everybody. It's not a moment to take advantage. It's a moment to sort of crystallize and move forward. Because often when that's happened, it actually freed the organization, in my experience, in a lot of ways, because it was a lot of energy went into sort of keeping something that wasn't going to work.
Yeah. So when you realize, and just in case anybody's not following along, USA is your universal shareholder agreement, which is both your prenup and your wedding vows and everything all put into one document, as it were. So fair enough, and hopefully some valuation. Yeah, that's excellent. All right, so we've talked about the benefits of having a great partnership. So some examples of how important that's been in our experiences, some negative ones, and how to disengage. But like the title of this topic is, how do you find the right ones so that you can get success? So, Ethan, maybe I'll go to you first of all, because Clairvest has got to find great organizations to invest in. So what do you do to filter, to find, to nurture the right business partnerships to help with the success of the organization? What recommendations do you have?
From what does Clairvest do, or recommendations for those?
Either way would be great. Yeah.
So Clairvest, we're pretty old school in our approach. We do direct outreach. That's exactly how this partnership started. Mitch Green, another board member, reached out to Alex, who, ignored his approaches for a while before finally caving. But that's the, there's no magic to it. That is it. Picking up the phone, sending some emails, going to conferences, engaging with an industry that you want to invest in. And then from there, meeting people, forming relationships, and being patient, because the types of partnerships where that Clairvest is interested in, where we partner alongside founder-led businesses, where the management team stays, that's not every company you meet, and it takes time, and it takes time to nurture a relationship and make it work. So for us, it's really just, it's getting out there at events and meeting people and continuing to show value and show that we're interested, and show that we care about the space and about the company and about where it's headed, and have our own independent view on how to get there as well.
I remember those days, because I remember like Mitch didn't just meet Alex or just look at financial statements. He met a bunch of us. I remember meeting him in a boardroom, and who is this Mitch guy? And he's asking these really polite but incredibly insightful questions that, just getting to understand how even those of us in the management team thought about things. So it's good lessons in how to kind of dig into it. Alex, you brought along like a dozen different business owners and whatnot that have joined us. You invite some employees along the way. I mean, you've got to have learned some lessons to make sure that you're, to the extent you can, you're inviting the right people to the party. What do you want to share about that?
Yeah, I'll take a little, rather than sort of the seeking, I'll maybe go from sort of when you're having the discussion, maybe a little bit sort of further along the journey, if you will. During that discussion, during the early parts of the discussion with somebody, is the focus more about money, or is it about what we're trying to accomplish? And I think that's one tell I have, because if it's more about where we're going and what we're doing, and that seems to dominate more, and the questions are about the team and the people, and it has to evolve that way, then I know it's right. But if it's really only about how much money, when, like how, like, and that certainly is an important part of the equation when it comes to acquisition, but it can't be everything. So for me, that's sort of one tell. And another thing is transparency is a two-way street. And so that's another, what I would say is that is the business or partner or whoever it is starting to show transparency about them. We're quite transparent about our organization. Do we really sort of evolve that and create that transparency? And then the last one I would sort of clue in on, when I'm having a discussion, does the dialogue have a lot of we, or is it me and I? And because that would tell me the kind of leader we're working with is how they think about their team and how they think about their organization and their clients. Are they aligned in that sort of partnership context, or is it just sort of a lone wolf, person trying to run their business? And so, yeah, for me, those are sort of the things that I listen to when I'm talking to people.
Yeah, that really resonates from my seat, because I get to be involved, fortunately, in a lot of the solutions partner and vendor partner relationships, and all of that rings true. When you have a vendor partner whose total engagement is how much of our product are you going to move, what are the SKUs, how many, and it's not, hey, what do you guys actually do? What's of importance to your clients? How can we be part of your success? Totally different relationships. And we may still have to buy from the other vendors, but it doesn't mean we have to. It's not a partnership. It's just a transaction, if it were. Ethan, I feel like you want to jump in there.
Yeah, I said I like Alex's comment though. If it's about 100% about the money, it's not a partnership. It's a 100% sale of a business, or it's a transaction, which is fine. That has its place too, right? There are times when that makes sense, but it's a different thing. A partnership should be, that is one of a suite of items that kind of need to make sense. It needs to be, of course, deal terms need to be there if it's an M&A deal, but also if you're looking to partner with F12 as in an acquisition context, it needs to be what's your role in the new organization? Does that make sense for you? Are you getting equity and participating in the continued growth? Do you think the vision of where the two businesses can go together is better than each individually? And if those make sense as well as the deal terms, that's two thumbs up. And if it's just want the money and retire, that there's place for that too, but it's a different type of thing. It's a sale and not a partnership.
Sometimes you're just buying the house and you're moving in. That's fine. Other times you're buying the house and you're moving in together. totally different
Yeah,
conversation.
you might have renters in the house.
Now you got some other things to look into. Excellent. Well, this was great. We've concluded the questions I have, and now we get to turn it over to some better questions that some of the audience have had. And I'm going to ask them. And for any of us who are joining us for the first time live, we have a Q&A. Go ahead and ask some questions, but some have come in. One question that came in was, at what stage of an organization's growth is it recommended to consider entering into a third-party partnership? So bringing in somebody from outside the business. What's the right stage to do that?
You want to go ahead, Alex, if you have a view?
You go first. I'll follow up.
I would say there are different, and by third party, I'm assuming PE partner or
well, it's vague, so it could be that, it could be others, but let's take it under that. Yeah,
I'll say a financial partner. There are different financial partners for different stages of growth. So I would say there are. It depends. It's a wishy-washy answer, but there are venture capital partners if you're a startup, and there's late stage growth equity investors more similar to a Clairvest. There's middle of the curve kind of growth trajectory investors, and then there's late stage investors as well. So there's part of it is finding an organization that suits the current trajectory of the company and where the business is at that time.
So you're flipping it. Rather than
you don't want to be the biggest company that the business has ever invested in, and you don't want to be the smallest.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, and I totally agree. And I think, for me, it's bridging the valleys of death, right? So when you sort of feel the business, your organization maybe on the treadmill, like you've grown, shrunk, and you just can't sort of take that next jump, there's a reason. And I think those, for me, have been really good points at which, when we brought in an outside third-party investor to come in, the knowledge gap that they fill were the things that were keeping us from getting to the next phase of growth. And so, some people can cut through it. We couldn't in some of those times. So it made more sense to bring it in. And then inevitably the expansion and the growth happens because they carry that knowledge. It's front of mind for them. It isn't for, it certainly wasn't for me, right?
And for anybody who's not familiar with that term, Valleys of Death comes from a book called Scaling Up, The Rockefeller Habits. Recommend it, but it's these natural periods in a business's evolution when growth to the next level is particularly challenging and called the Valley of Death for a reason. It can be a trap that businesses can fall into. Another question here is, how important is it for a potential business partner to have expertise in your specific industry or market? Great question. What?
It isn't, in sometimes, I know for us, when we selected Clairvest, we loved that, and it was on our list as somebody that knew the IT space. They didn't need to be technology people, but understood the industry. What we didn't want to do is go into a board meeting and spend a lot of time educating on what a managed service provider is and how the financial metrics link up to that, and because that can sort of drain a little bit of time. They eventually can catch up, but ultimately that was sort of on our criteria. But as far as important for them to be in industry, none at all. I mean, Wayne was in automotive. And he was a tremendous asset to the organization because he brought the business acumen. That was us going from frat boys to a legitimate business. So he just had to.
And he would say, I don't want to get into operations, but here's the business perspective. Like, here's what the finances are saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's how we need to organize. And this is what we need to report on a regular basis. Again, some stuff that seems really simple now, but certainly wasn't at the point of time when we were running the organization.
Ethan, anything you care to add?
Yeah, I think I like that thought. I'd say it's important that the partner fills a need, whether it might be industry expertise, it might be business acumen in the case of Wayne, someone who can help professionalize and get you to the next level, or it might be a type of transaction you're looking for. If you're looking for a minority investor or something that the investor does that others don't, there needs to be something that they do that is unique and necessary for the business, because at the end of the day, it's money. Everyone can provide it. There needs to be some other thing that comes with it. And it can be, it might be industry, it might be something else, but there should be something behind it that's valuable.
And Alex, I mean, in our past conversations about partnerships, you've used an expression, something about the judgment and the participation of the partner success. How do you remember how you put that? I think you had a phrase for it.
Yeah. I think you're referring to judgment without contribution is the death knell of partnerships.
Can you say that again? I just love this line.
Judgment without contribution is the death knell of partnerships.
Love that.
And I think where I think when you have somebody, and it could be somebody you worked with or been part of the journey, and when they start sort of judging what's happening instead of actually trying to contribute to make it better, that's usually that starts to put knives in it, and you got to really work to have that not the case. But yeah, I think that's the one you're referring to.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I'm glad you remembered it. I should have written it down because I loved it when I heard it. Another questions come in. One concern we've had in bringing in a partner, so this is from a leader of another organization, is the potential entanglements with our associated business that the partner would not be involved with. Any suggestions for that possible barrier? It's an interesting one. It's nuanced.
We run into that a little bit on the M&A, probably not as much as Ethan does, because it sounded like that was his scenario on the entanglement of different interests that sort of lied on the side. But I know for us, we do consider that when we're looking at M&A as to, what parts, because sometimes they can have a piece of intellectual property that sits in another entity, but it's entangled in the business. So as long as you can align the interest and it's very transparent as to what it is, I think it can work. But those can be tricky ones to navigate if you don't.
Ethan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think communication's key. If there's if there are conflicts of interest, what sprang to mind, and I'm not sure if this is what the question was actually asking, but if you're looking for an investor and they have in other investments in the same industry and you're worried about competition with another portfolio company, to use private equity speak, that they spend their time with, those questions should be had up front. And some PE firms will invest in multiple businesses within the same industry. Some will avoid it, or the Clairvest approach is there needs to be enough geographic separation. We have 2 IT businesses, one in Canada and one in the US. So we figure there's enough breathing room for both to exist. The other business we're invested in is based out of Texas. It would be very, very unlikely for us to invest in a business located in Florida that does the same thing, because it's a couple states east.
But you were full disclosure right from the beginning that there was these 2 relationships and introduced CEOs, because I think a nuance that might be in this particular question is they're bringing somebody in and there's another business that they also have an interest in. That is to say, the people bringing in this another business partner, and that makes an entanglement, or there's some concern about that, which might be the question of when you brought us on. You already had the Ameriplex relationship, and you had to bring that up.
Sure. Yeah, I think disclosing and discussing whether it's an issue for the partnership is and understanding the scope is really the first step, I'd say. And if it works for everybody and there's a way around what might seem like a conflict of interest, that's great. And if it doesn't work out because the 2 businesses or relationships are too close to home, then you need to be honest about it.
I'd also add, if there's transactions that are occurring between those organizations, can probably put another dimension to it that are worth talking about and understanding. But if it's completely 2 separate businesses and it just happens to have the same owner, that's a very different story than if there's things that are happening between the business.
In some cases, it actually might be a good thing, right? If the one's a supplier to another business and there's an investor's, an upstream and downstream investment, that might be positive because it can grease the wheels for a relationship between the 2 companies that's positive. So there can be good things that come from entanglements, or I'm not sure whatever the word is.
Well, an example from way back, a blast for the past there, Alex, I can think of is when I remember being a partner in F12, and you and Wayne had set up another organization to help fund our hardware as a service program. So it was an entanglement. I wasn't part of that. You and Wayne were, but it was really clear, like on the financials. And so but I could see in some scenarios, if there wasn't trust, that people could get questions and things like that. I'm gonna say this question's super nuanced, and if the person who asked it wants to continue the conversation, like email me at dgillard, DGILLARD at f12.net, and I can hook you up with Alex and Ethan. And in case we circled around it but never got to the heart of it, I think there might be worth a further discussion that Alex or Ethan could have. Last question here we have time for is, well, it's a meaty one too. Oh no, there's two more. So I'll hopefully we'll have time if we move quickly. How can you ensure that a potential partner is committed to a long-term relationship in mutual success? Are there any red flags, especially if they are appearing transparent, and that's in quotes, so appearing transparent in the beginning? What do you guys look out for?
Well, I've been duped a couple times, so experience lends itself to this question. But I think it goes back to just that those things that I brought up earlier. Just the really listen to the words, rather than like, again, is it we, and is it about sort of the outcome? Is that conversation evolving forward, or is it more about the transaction and the money? But you can never be guaranteed. Partnerships are a means to an end, so you really have to be clear on what long-term means. Because long-term in a marriage is very different than long-term in business. Because if somebody might be coming in with, I'm going to retire in 5 years.
It's not till death do you part. That's the difference.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think really opening up what that definition is, so people know and it's transparent, and just remember, transparency is a two-way street, right? And if you're thinking long-term's 20 years and they think long-term's 3, well, you could both be saying long-term. So anyways, those would be sort of my offerings there.
One other tell that I've noticed, and this isn't always true, but in some of the transactions I've been involved with, is things can be phrased as my employees are concerned or my spouse is concerned, and it's actually the individual. Not always. Sometimes it is genuinely concerned. Sometimes that's a proxy you can pick up for that the individual has these concerns, and that it's like, I have this friend that has this question.
Yeah. I'm asking for a friend.
That's right. I'm asking for a friend. Ethan.
Great comments. I like them both. I guess practical advice. So from our perspective, putting your money where your mouth is a really good way to see if someone is committed to the long term. If it's, private equity investor perspective, if the CEO, partner, and management team are reinvesting a good chunk of their personal net worth or their equity back in the business, that speaks volumes that they're committed to the success of the partnership and believe in it, versus saying, hey, I'm going to take 90% of my money out, but or 95, and we'll put 5% in the business, but trust me, I'm committed to the long term. There's those two things don't quite jive. And then I would say practical advice for those looking for a financial partner or looking to partner with a business like F12, do reference calls. That's a great way to just do your own research. Ask to speak to another business that was acquired by that company or another portfolio company within the PE partners portfolio, and just say, hey, would like to speak to someone and get their perspective, and make sure you get a few, and some hopefully that went well, and hopefully some that went okay, so you get a rounded perspective.
Yeah, well done. Yeah, I get that. Another question we have here is, I'm considering partnering with a larger company to help expand my reach, but I'm worried about being overshadowed by their brand. How can I ensure that my company's identity and reputation are preserved in the partnership? That's a great question.
Well, I'd have to say, if that's important to somebody, if the brand, you have to put it in. I've seen other, firms do that, where there's been deals that have been struck that brand and identity and integrity was actually part of it. It's not something we do as an organization, usually because there's strength in the brand to continue to expand. So over time, we want to see the brand sort of evolve, and we don't have to come in day one and do it, as an organization. But if it's important, somebody says, hey, we want to keep our brand for 5 years, that needs to be just brought up in the deal. So but what I've learned, though, is brands do flip quite easily. It's the people, it's the integrity of the business that you want to be intact. The name of it transfers quite easily. So anyways,
and that's the difference between brand and culture, and maybe that was meant too.
Yeah.
And you may have to decide if are you willing to sacrifice the brand or have it subsumed, or what about the culture? Yeah, Ethan, anything you want to add on that? And I unfortunately, this will have to be our last comment.
No, I agree with Alex there. I think it's brand is important, but have the conversation. I think anything that's important to you as a seller in this context should just be spoken about, and make sure the deal breakers are on the table if that's a deal breaker, and see if you can work through it and find a mutual path forward.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. This is a meaty and interesting conversation about finding successful business partnerships. And we even explored a little bit about how to effect a equitable divorce. And the big lesson there was to talk about it before you get to that point. Alex and Ethan, we're indebted for sharing your wisdom and experience with us. Thank you very much. And to all of our audience, thank you for your participation and excellent questions. Take care.
Thank you for having me.